Club. Whoops, here we go. Welcome to the San Ramon Valley Democratic Club. My name is Brody Hilp. I serve as president. Our vice president, Rick Adler, and board member, Cecilia Manalga, are here. Cecilia is our Zoom administrator in case you have any questions about Zoom. Also, if you want to do phone banking for the 2022 elections and save our democracy, email Cecilia. Look for chat for her email address because she is our Contra Costa County volunteer leader for activism. So again, welcome to everyone. We're so glad that you could join us tonight. It is Black History Month, a special time to recognize the accomplishments and deep racial inequities in our past and the systemic racism still present in our society. We invite you to watch our meeting in July of 2021, when our speakers were Dr. William Darity of Duke University and Kirsten Mullen, who spoke on racial justice from reparations to reimagining. If you have time, please watch it on our YouTube channel. It's at YouTube, San Ramon Valley Democratic Club, and then click the video part. We're going to put the link to the video in chat. And we all know about the terrible death of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, but two good things have happened. Yesterday, as you know, the three men who killed Ahmaud Arbery were found guilty of federal hate crimes. They'd also been found guilty of murder in a state court, but that conviction had a possibility of being overturned. So it was a success that they were found guilty at the federal level. And then today, the three Minneapolis police officers who helped restrain George Floyd when he was killed by another police officer were found guilty of violating George Floyd's civil rights again in a federal court. Another thing that's slightly positive are, our Democratic Party of Contra Costa County has written a proclamation for Black History Month. It's too long to read here, but we're going to put the link in chat. It mentions how there's systemic racism and it continues in our communities, but it also mentions there is some progress. Contra Costa County is home to 26 Black elected officials, many of whom are city council members throughout the county. And of course, we also have Tony Thurman, our state superintendent of public instruction, and Dinah Becton, our Contra Costa County district attorney, who's one of our speakers tonight. So we're sort of on the road to changing long systemic racism. It won't be easy, but at least we're sort of slightly in that direction. And now we would like to welcome our first speaker, our favorite Congressman, Mark DeSaulnier. Mark is our champion. He is our advocate for the values we believe in. He fights to make America more just, fair, and equal. What is Mark's background? Mark has been active in government representing people for a long time. In the early 1990s, he served on the Concord City Council. He served as Contra Costa County Supervisor, State Assembly member, and State Senator. In 2015, Mark was elected to the 11th Congressional District. Did you know he serves on more committees than any other Congress member? He's very busy, 10 committees. Some of the main ones that I thought were interesting were the Rules Committee, the Committee of Oversight and Government Reform, which has two subcommittees, Economic and Consumer Policy and National Security. He's also on the Committee on Education and Labor and the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and many more subcommittees. And I hope he tells us about some of his committee work and his legislation. Some of the interesting ones I thought of were, how our newspapers are disappearing, right? Well, he had the Saving the Local News Act, Jobs for a Carbon-Free Transportation Act, Early Childhood Education is a Right Act, Early Childhood Mental Health Support Act, Gun Safety Board and Research Acts. So Mark, it's good to see you. How are you? We are honored to have you here tonight.
I'm good. I'd hope to get a haircut today, so forgive me for looking like the 70s San Francisco bartender I once was. But thank you for inviting me. Just came back from Oakland and putting in my candidate statement for the new 10th congressional district. My favorite, I don't have a favorite member of Congress. They're all tied, but I really appreciate that comment. So I was in traffic coming back here thinking somebody ought to do something about this traffic, make it more efficient. And we're trying to do that. I think there's a great opportunity, and I'll talk to that a little bit, coming out of COVID, fingers crossed. I've been very active for a number of years, and this is a real opportunity to start using telecommuting more. We can see the productivity, so we're trying to push that as much as possible. And of course, employees and employers have seen the benefit for that. But I'll get to that because I just wanted to sort of go through my committees so that you can understand and ask questions. I want to get to your questions, as many as possible, because this is a good group for questions and we have a long relationship. So first, a correction. I am not the only member of Congress on 4 committees. Very dear friend, Jamie Ruskin, is on the Rules Committee with me and on the Oversight Committee. We just had a wonderful event with Jamie. I have a series of book clubs because you know I like to read. And I invite authors to come to that, and they're fundraisers. And Jamie just did a wonderful hour with us talking about his book. And if you haven't read it yet, it's quite remarkable. He's a remarkable human being. Great tragedy in his life a year ago. And I was, along with his daughter, the last family member of a member of Congress out of the US Capitol, because we were in rooms next to each other when that attack came on. So they had to come back and get us after they had removed everyone else. But he works harder than I do, I would say. He was the manager for the second Trump impeachment. He's on the January 6th committee in addition to those other committee assignments. So I just wanted to correct the record and indulge you with a very special person who represents a district in Maryland, and we're lucky to have it. So I serve with Jamie on the Rules Committee. I'm really proud of the fact that I was voted vice chair of that committee for this 2-year cycle by my colleagues. So this is something I really am grateful for, that my colleagues voted for me to do that, even over people with more seniority. I serve under the chair of that committee, Jim McGovern, a wonderful, wonderful member, another good friend who represents Central Massachusetts, where I spent 4 years of my life in a small Catholic college, Holy Cross. Chair McGovern likes to say that, well, I couldn't get in, but Mark got in. So, and another dear friend who went there is Peter Welsh from Vermont, who's now running for the US Senate and is a graduate of Bolt Hall. So the Rules Committee is a lot of members don't want to be in the Rules Committee because it's very labor intensive. It is historically called the Speakers Committee. It's the oldest committee in the House of Representatives. And every bill that goes to the floor and every amendment has to go through the Rules Committee. So it gives you a good understanding of how the process works, such as it is, and also gives you more leverage, quite frankly. People, members and their staff and the committee members, if you have a good reputation, know that you are going to have influence on their bill getting to the floor. And I'm also, because I'm on that committee, am allowed to present bills on the floor along with the chairs of jurisdiction. Generally, they assign me to present bills from my areas of expertise, which is the Transportation Infrastructure Committee and the Education and Labor Committee. I can tell you, representing Contra, Costa for a long time at every level of government, local, state, and federal, that the two things that consistently poll highest, and many of you know this and wouldn't be surprised by this, um, over those 30 plus years in Contra Costa are transportation, housing and infrastructure, and education. Those two things always poll right at the top. And because we have a very strong and thoughtful labor movement in the Bay Area, and particularly in Contra Costa and Alameda County, that's another area that is important to me. So I was able to present the infrastructure bill that signed into law that is the biggest investment in this country since the interstate highway into our infrastructure. And I'm very pleased with being part of that. And having been able to put multiple of my amendments got incorporated in that. And Bertie, you mentioned a couple of the bills. In the legislature, the currency is bills. In Congress, it's bills, but mostly amendments, what you can get tagged into what's called affectionately catching a ride on a bigger bill. So I was able to get an infrastructure bill on climate change. As many of you know, I served 3 governors on the Air Resources Board representing the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. It was one of the best things I've ever been able to be part of in my life. California, because of the California waiver in the U.S. Clean Air Act, sets the standards when it comes to air pollution, and CARB is the place that happens. Historically, it's been very bipartisan, but like everything, it's got more difficult. So with my background in transportation and air quality and the refineries here, I was able to get first a very big build, $3 billion and more to build the infrastructure, the electric charging stations, and the fuel cell stations that we have been so good at in California. We've got almost half of the charging stations in the entire United States. We've got 12% of the population, but about 42, 45% of the charging station. A lot of that has to do with a lot of people, but I've been involved in that for since I was appointed to CARB in 1994. So that bill, the Biden administration told our committee, the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, that was one of their biggest priorities. Just to give you an idea, we've got lots of money. The market is speaking to alternative fuels. General Motors and Ford have all declared that they're moving out of the fossil fuel business. The Chinese are very deeply invested in it, sort of timely given what's happening in Eastern Europe today, and I'll talk to that at the end. But you got to get the cars, you've got to get batteries, you've got range issues, you got to get the cost down, and you have to have the chicken and egg problem that we've talked about for years in air quality. If you want to get carbon reductions, you have to get the infrastructure, and that includes from what is called from well to wheel, as zero emissions as possible. So these electric charging stations, their scale's going up, and in addition to California being dominant in its leadership in this field of getting the infrastructure out, we have to catch up. The Chinese are putting in 100,000 a month. They know where the future is. They know not just to protect the planet, but these energy sources are safer, more efficient. They have some challenges, like all energy sources, but the market is clearly moving in this direction rapidly, and we have to provide this infrastructure. And I argue, and I've argued this on the floor with the Republican members who've been against many of these things. I've said, well, you worry about global competition. We're losing the race for the energy future. And historically, the countries and the cultures that control energy and knowledge have a disproportionate power and influence in the world. So that's really exciting. The second one you mentioned is the transition from fossil fuels onto these clean energies, low carbon emittings. We are a national leader here in Contra Costa. We've got 4 refineries. There are only 13 refineries in California left. Those 4 are larger than most of the others. And we have a very active environmental movement, home of John Muir, and a very, very sophisticated labor movement, both the steelworkers, the building trades, carpenters and laborers. So I've been spending months bringing them together so that we don't lose any of those good jobs and we have that political capital between those important democratic constituencies, labor unions, working people, and the environmental movement and social justice folks, a key component of it, including in this county. So that grant, that bill would give counties like ours the ability to get a grant to facilitate these transitions. So the good paying jobs we fought hard there for, all the good things that that gives our economy, the school districts, half of their revenue from property taxes because Prop 99 come from those very large assessed value facilities. We want to close them down. We want to transition to a carbon-free fuel source. But we want to do it so that we do it smartly and we meet our goals and we do it based on evidence-based research. So that bill will provide a grant. The idea is to, working consistently with the Board of Supervisors because they have 3 of the 4 refineries in this county, the 5th refinery in the Bay Area is across the water. In Solano, we've been working with them. They would get this grant funding and they would be the convener. That Contra Costa has a world-class environmental health and hazardous materials division within the house, the health department. And we have the benefit of the 2 national labs here that do remarkable work around this. So that's one of the bills you mentioned. And then transitioning to the educational labor, childcare is, we are dead last in developed countries in the world in what we spend, according to the UN, and it corroborated by many research papers when it comes to child development, even though we were amongst the leaders at places like UCSF and Johns Hopkins in understanding cognitive development and how impactful getting these support systems, getting childcare, universal, high quality, early education and childcare, we're dead last. And it shows in our development generationally. So this is a priority for me. It was in Build Back Better. I have Bill, and you mentioned the mental health bill as well. This is a priority for me on that committee. Let's see, oversight and government reform. I've had multiple interviews today over the Ukraine situation. I've been to the Ukraine as the whole time I've been in Congress. I have been on the subcommittee for national security chaired by a dear friend from Boston, Stephen Lynch. I've been to the front lines in Eastern Ukraine. I sat across the table from the then president of the Ukraine. Vladimir Putin doesn't believe in democracy. He thinks that average people shouldn't have a say in governing themselves, and he wants to restore the Soviet Union, in my view, the old Soviet Union. He went into the Ukraine once, and little green men, remember that? I had a meeting with a group of people just after that, and a former KGB officer was asked by one of my colleagues, a Republican member from Maryland, asked him, how can we trust Putin when he just makes things up? And it was a remarkable comment. This former KGB officer who had served with Putin said, well, it's not lying when you know he's lying. So that tells you about, I think in a succinct way, what we're dealing with here, and what happens when you get leaders of important, powerful countries who don't believe in the truth. I'll leave it at that. We can talk about him later if you want, talk about defending democracy. So I think the president has been right on. He's built a coalition. Very important what the German chancellor did just this week, saying that they would stop Nord Stream 2 from being implemented. That's the huge pipeline that is in the sort of the bottom of the geopolitics of this, because the other main pipeline goes through the Ukraine. So Putin gets what he wants. It's another example of why we have to be energy independent and get off of fossil fuels. I think I've covered oversight. On oversight, I have led the charge on the Sacklers. Both Chairman Elijah Cummings, a very wonderful, remarkable human being who is a friend and chair of the committee, and now Carolyn Maloney from New York, I work closely with. I led the charge. We brought the Sacklers into a public hearing, and we've been working very closely to stop that. Just a national tragedy that they have to be held accountable for. Also was very involved in vaping and trying to get to the bottom of what electronic cigarettes are doing to young people in vaping, and we've had real good success on that as well. So I'm going to stop there. Just before I stop there is behavioral health is a big issue for me. One of the reasons I'm so close to Jamie, even before his tragedy, was we are open about our history and our family of really wonderful people, but also people who have challenged with behavioral health. My dad, 32 years ago, took his life. He was had very serious depression problems, was under the care of a psychologist when he took his life. Jamie's son, tragically, a Harvard Law School student, took his life. You probably all know that, just a year ago. So behavioral health, we are putting a lot of work onto this on the subcommittee I'm chair of on the Education and Labor Committee. It's a wonderful committee. It's called the HELP Committee. Health is HELP stands for Health, Employment, Labor, and Pensions. We have made really good progress, and you don't read about it, but we've really worked with the Republicans. There's an agreement that we have to invest more in behavioral health, more in cancer research. That's another place I've put a lot of time and effort into. And it's actually we've added money. I started the Cancer Survivors Caucus in the Congress, and through that, we've created a partnership where the previous president wanted to cut cancer research. We actually increased it in a bipartisan way. So, but on the behavioral health side, we're putting a lot of work into that, and it's both disturbing and wonderful. The exponential work that we are doing in this country and around the world, but particularly in UCSF does a remarkable job at this, in understanding neuroscience, trauma, cognitive development, and how we can effectively help people under stress and trauma, not just with medication, but with all kinds of treatments. The sad part is we're not deploying this research quick enough. So that's what we're doing in the committee, is working with the Republicans, with the research facilities, and with employers, public and private, to say, how do we partner to make sure people can get access to behavioral health? When the ACA was passed, we in California worked very hard with the administration. George Miller was a warrior for this, that there would be parity in that law between behavioral health and mental health. And it's transforming people's lives, but we need to deploy the services, particularly the lower income communities and communities of color. And we need to get more people who reflect their culture into the fields. We've had since the ACA passed in this country, we've had a 75% increase in people requesting behavioral health services, but we've had a 25% decrease in young people going into the field. So that's a priority for me. I will we'll end with district things. I have a fabulous staff, both in DC and here in the district. Opposites attract, apparently, in Congress between staff and members. But I have a great staff, and I want to acknowledge Chanel Scales Preston, my extraordinary district director, who, along with my chief of staff in DC, Betsy Aromar, and my ledge director, are amongst the best in Congress. We've been recognized twice out of 535 seats in the House and Senate as really excellent, the best in the Congress at constituent relations. So we do a lot of town halls, we do a lot of access, and we try to keep our constituents informed. So stop there and answer questions.
Thank you, Mark. I think there's some questions in the chat. Rick, Rick Adler, do you want to help me read those?
Sure. Looks like the one I see here is, are there congressional seats that we can help by phone calls and text that may be in a surprisingly close race? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, in other words, people want to donate their time and their money to candidates, but they want candidates that are, probably going to win or on the edge of winning. And do you know of any that maybe we could help?
They're still evolving, but we know where they are. We want to protect Josh Harder out in the Valley, and thank you for getting him there in the first place.
Yes.
Jim Costa, I think, is good, but we might watch him a little further south. And then there will be a Democratic primary for the open seat that was Jerry McNerney's, but because Jerry's retiring, that will be a seat that will be a challenge for us to keep. So those are the ones close to us. We would like to pick up, and we've got to win these midterms. And thank God for Nancy Pelosi. This idea that history is history and we have to be mindful, but we can't lose the majority. So we'll get you more seats, but those are 3 seats that I can think of right off the top. And then we want to be engaged in other seats, but in Southern California. And Brody, to the degree we could coordinate with the clubs, you did a great job. Rossmore did a remarkable job of getting people to text, phone, develop relationships. We helped get Doug Jones elected to the US Senate, a remarkable thing in Alabama. Unfortunately, he was not able to keep that seat. But I had a conversation with Senator Jones. It was sort of comical. He said, I said, you may not, I don't know if ever heard of a place called Walnut Creek, California, but there's a retirement community there. And I was in those rooms where there were 50 to 60 liberal Bay Area members in Walnut Creek, California. And it was really, really great because it wasn't just GOTV. It was establishing relationships with low propensity voters and really as a friend, calling them, texting them. And a lot of them were African Americans in what's called the Brown Belt of Alabama. So that is all to say, we're really good at what we do here in the Bay Area. You're really good at it, but we have to win the House back. And if we win the House back, we're not going to have the nightmare of that monster coming back and trying to take over this country. Yeah. Because if we win the House back, he knows that we're going to be in control for 2 more years, and it's more likely we will continue to build on our majority. And so this is really important. We'll get you more names and districts, but if we can be coordinated with this, and I think Chanel's on the call here, to the degree we can coordinate with you and the Central Committee and the other clubs, we'd love to be a resource and a partner with you on this. I'm planning on traveling with colleagues of mine, particularly labor colleagues working through national labor organizations in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, those really tough places, to talk about what we've done in California with the labor movement to help working families and why they shouldn't be discouraged by what we're doing, particularly around energy, that there are jobs for them, good paying jobs, and they should be with us. This isn't West Virginia in the coal industry. We're being really smart about identifying good paying jobs that'll last for generations. So we really need to work together.
Our Zoom administrator, Cecilia Manalga, is our Contra Costa County organizer for volunteers. And so we've been dropping places in the chat where people can go and do phone banking and everything. I think the question was more about donating money because some of our members are older and they just wanted to donate money, but you can let us know what you think. Okay.
We can, and you can, you're all smart people. You can Google this. You can, Katie and I are working with Eric and Mike Thompson, all our colleagues around here, to make sure we're all singing from the same hymn book and getting you that information.
Okay, I know we have a question from Sheila Fish. Sheila, would you like to unmute yourself and ask the question?
I am alarmed at how extreme our country has become and the election of 2016. And it's all over the world. It's happening in Europe. And I think a lot of this is about social media and the how quickly people pick up on social media and how ads on social media reinforce extreme positions. And I think we need to do something about that at the national level. Something like the publishers have with newspapers, where if you're putting a lie up there, it's removed, or you have consequences for it. Even thinking about people who put the lies up, having consequences. And I see nothing like that other than a little bit I've seen from the Congresswoman on the peninsula. I forget her name right now. I am fiery about this.
Well, I'm sorry you haven't heard anything. I thought I was talking too long, but this has been important.
Oh, I wasn't here the whole time. I got caught up in the Ukraine. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I didn't mention it in my introductory remarks. So in the Oversight Committee, we've brought Facebook, we've brought Google in. I won't I don't talk to them. I don't take money from them anymore. I told them in a public hearing that as a Bay Area elected official, I was very proud of the innovation that we've created here, but that I had begun to believe that what these companies would be remembered for is destroying democracy. I've done a number of meetings with Roger McNamee. He wrote the book Zooped, if you're familiar
Yes,
with that
it's
book.
great.
Roger and I are good friends and colleagues. We tried talking about probably Anna Eshoo, a wonderful friend who has important seniority on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and she represents much of the peninsula, including Stanford. I have, any of you want to join, follow our social media and our website. We become friends with a woman who wrote, I think, the best book on this, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zubar. Actually, she was supposed to be in we call them discussions with DeSaulnier, where we have Zoom discussions and we talk about these things. So you're right. This is a nefarious, very powerful, sophisticated, directing the knowledge we know about neuroscience and stress and fear is all built into this system, these algorithms. So David Cicilline and I are the leads on this. David from Rhode Island is the chair of the subcommittee on antitrust. He's been wonderful on this. So he and I have been working on these issues, and I absolutely agree with you. Whether it's, I sat in that hearing and got to question Michael Cohen and Mueller. It's very frustrating to me that people didn't read the Mueller report. It says right in there what Putin and Trump are doing. And they were using social media, and he's doing it now. So you're absolutely right. This is a huge thing. I've done town halls on this. We'd be happy to engage the club in any way you want, because you're right. It's a huge problem, and they're not going to do it on their own. And the thing you mentioned is we have both the Security Exchange Commission on Cicilline's side on antitrust laws about these folks, but then the Federal Communications Commission, the Biden administration has put some really good appointees in there. It's been hard to get them approved because the Republicans want to defend all this stuff and not get to the truth. But your idea is just putting the fairness doctrine back in for everybody. Reagan took it out, Republicans took it out. We want to put that in for all media, which would help with a lot of the sensationalism, but also for social media. And then David and I have a bill that is our biggest priority in this field, and you can go on our website. We've got amazing supporters, and it's part of the local news that Brody talked about. David and my bill would set up so that newspapers can negotiate licensing fees the way the recording industry and the film industry does now, so that they get paid for the content that goes on these sites. Right now, they rip them off and take them for free, and it generates people to go on those sites. And then I have a bill, a lot of these new newspapers, so this is combined about how you get information, are nonprofits. And it creates a better atmosphere. The Philadelphia papers are all nonprofits, and it's a really good antidote to social media. So all of this is a wide, broad array, a barrage of things that we're doing that I'm happy to make sure you know about them and that you can make comments on. Really important. How people get information and how they're being thrust into fear and the lack of truth it's happened before in American history and in world history, but never on this level of sophistication. Never.
Horrible.
So we cannot hold the social media to the same level as we hold newspapers of being reputable and stuff. That's still, the law still has not governed how they can present their media. Is that right?
Well, it's been weakened. I mean, the people who don't believe in democracy and the minority party who are against our progressive ideas of inclusiveness and equality, this is one of the ways they keep control, is how they provide information. I mean, Donald Trump was a perfect example of this, but he's not the only one. So
So the
Yeah, it's a
social
huge
media
thing.
has to kick the people off that are doing that.
They're doing more because we've been collectively
Good.
banging on them. Not
Okay.
just the Congress, but Americans are
Okay.
waking up, and there's some really good signs. One of the things is younger people aren't going to Facebook anymore. It's all us more mature people. And part of it is because they became aware of how misleading it's been. So, like Trump's social media basically is, and the far right people are creating their own. I mean, Trump started his own social media this week. Unfortunately, it was pretty inept.
Yeah.
Like him.
Thank you. We have a question from Ellis. Ellis, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Where's Ellis's hat? I've never seen you without your hat on.
I'm wearing that hat.
Who
It's
stole
imposter.
Ellis's Dr. Zeus American hat?
I'm going to ask you a really hard question. Like Sheila Fish, I've been watching Ukraine on television for several days. Hasn't done a lot for my stress level. But the question is, would you favor asking Ukraine to join NATO? It seems like that's what Putin is saying, that he really doesn't want to happen. If we really want to put the screws to Putin, ask them to join NATO. And then he's already invaded Ukraine. Why take the fight any place else? There you go, Mark. Hard question.
It's a good question. I don't think it's a tough question in this regard. Because it's part of what we just talked about, the sophistication of propaganda, including in Russia, which is really profound as somebody who has been to Russia and respects the people. But he was looking for a provocation. And I think we did a really good job of being forceful, but not giving him an excuse. I just did an interview with KTVU, and sometimes they're usually pretty good, but every once in a while they remind you in an interview that they are affiliated with Murdoch and Fox. So they were looking for a provocation. I think in hindsight, he was going to do this anyways, but this is really important we hold down. So there's a process. It's a very thoughtful process to get admitted to NATO. I agree with staying with that process. And it would also jeopardize changing that process now after 70 years of creating NATO and having it be a stabilizing force. We should follow the process. It's worked so far, and not to be provocative. What we're hoping, I still hold hope that he'll stop because public opinion around the world will be so much against him. And I think he was calling everyone's bluff in the East and in the West. And I mentioned Nord Stream 2. I think that was really remarkable for a German chancellor who hasn't been there that long, who followed a brilliant German leader to say we're stopping Nord Stream 2. Now we're going to have a problem with gas prices all over the West. So Americans we're going to have to buck up and realize that we're going to have to be strong, but we're going to have to be smart about it is the answer to the question.
My father taught me that if you're in a fight with a bully, make sure you hurt them.
Alice.
So that they don't ever do it again.
Nope, I agree.
And we may not win this one, but it's gonna leave a mark.
Yep. Well, Nancy likes to quote a favorite quote of mine from Abraham Lincoln, who said, "With public sentiment, anything's possible. Without it, no law, no initiative has force." And in this instance, we're trying to infect public sentiment around the world. So that's why I think we have to be smart about how and I think the president's done a remarkable job. And President Biden has really appointed and allowed, his cabinet secretaries have done really good work, in my view, in spite of the fact that his predecessor did everything possible with Steve Bannon to get rid of the best and the brightest within these institutions, not presidential appointees, people who are civil servants. So we're trying to rebuild that at the same time.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Alice. I'll put on my Christmas list or your birthday a new hat if you've lost it.
Rick, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm looking at how far we should go with the sanctions, and I know one of the biggest ones, which could set off other repercussions, is the SWIFT, removing Russia from the SWIFT financial payment system. Do you think we might reach a point, or have we reached a point where that we could decide to do that?
I think the next 24 to 48 hours will tell us that. I think you're right. But I think that's the next shoe to drop if he doesn't stop. And a lot of this is directed at getting the few people in Russia who have influence over him directly to tell him they're hurting too and he needs to back off and it's not worth it. This is a very calculating KGB guy. If you've read his background, read his biographies, he doesn't think democracy, he thinks democracy is chaos. So, and he doesn't want to do it just in Russia. He wants to stop democracy around the world from my point. So I think SWIFT is the next shoe to drop. And I think if he doesn't back off quickly, and there's what I'm afraid is going to happen, where there's going to be a lot of innocent life lost. I think one of the things on this is he succeeded in Belarus of taking over the country and setting up a puppet without military action. So he hasn't been able to do that in Ukraine, which is one of the reasons we're in the position we're in now. So there's going to be sort of, in addition to the military action, what's left? Who governs Ukraine when he's done? Is it going to be a puppet government like in Belarus, or is it going to be an independent government, which is what they were striving to do? By the way, when I was there, I had a remarkable July 4th birthday. One of my sons was with me in the US Embassy in Kyiv. And it just makes me cry when I look at the pictures. I remember being there, and I think it was my freshman term, just thinking, how lucky am I? You know, thank you all for letting me do that. But this is really scary. It's hard to believe where the world is in this position.
Thank you. Susan Mann, you have a question about oil, natural gas and oil. Would you like to ask that?
Yeah, hi, Mark, and thank you. I appreciate all you do. It's oh shit. Excuse me. Here we go. The mic in front of me, sorry. I was just reading today that apparently Biden has kind of closed off the production of natural gas and oil in this country in an effort to go green. But the fact is that we're now going to be in desperate need of oil and gas, and also to probably will need to supply that same natural gas or some of it to Germany, because they've just been cut off. So what's your thinking about this? I mean, does he need to change? Does he need to make a 180-degree turn?
No, my understanding of what he suggested is, yes, it's just like the refineries here. We don't want to shut them down because that would be foolish. And it's not necessary to meet our carbon reduction targets. So, and I'm happy to go and get what he said and what legislation is available. We want to transition off of it. So we're not going to shut it down. And you have to be nimble, as you said. Carbon, you know, was part of the transition on traditional pollutants, calpine. Or not carbon, I mean, natural gas. It has not just carbon emissions, but also is bad on particulate matter, but it's good on SOx and NOx and other and smog, or better than oil. So it's a transitional fuel, but it's, I believe what the president was suggesting is a process to get us off, just like what I was talking about is a process for Contra Costa in California to get off fossil fuels, including natural gas, but starting with oil and gasoline.
Oh, that's great down the road, but right now he needs to reverse course, because if they're holding off on.
No, I don't. With all due respect, I think that's inaccurate. It would be very foolish and the president doesn't have the authority, and I wouldn't support it as I think I'm the 8th or 9th most liberal member of Congress. So, and on environmental issues, I'm a 98 or a 99% lifetime. So I with all due respect, let's check on your information, because I think the goal is to get off it, but not right now. There's a transition, a thoughtful one.
Okay. Thank you. We also, I don't know if Igor, are you available to talk, or are you at your other meeting? He had a question.
Igor's always at a meeting.
Right.
I want whatever he's taken.
Yes, exactly. I would like, well, I guess I'll ask the question then. And that has to do with rooftop solar. Do you have a position on that rooftop solar?
We need to get
You know,
more.
PG is trying to raise the fees, and people who've invested, thousands of dollars into rooftop solar, they thought they would recoup their money in 7 years, but with these extra fees, it's now going to take 30 years. And then so some people are saying, no, that we should talk to the governor and talk to the CPUC to say, no, please do not raise the fees, PG&E. What do you think?
They're wrong. The CPUC had to back off and we got to stay on them. The history of the CPUC, the PUC, has been one that's been close to the agencies they've regulated. Not always, but since they were started, because the railroad industry in California that helped create this country, this state. So they're wrong. We've got to get solar out where it's cheaper. It's becoming more affordable for everybody with climate change, and storage is a big issue. So we're really good investments on storage capabilities and affordability. Distributed generation is something that PG&E in particular has fought. I no longer will. I'm so mad at PG&E. They've had corporate executives who have left that company with millions of dollars, and they've underinvested and been allowed to underinvest in their infrastructure. We've known climate change was going on here. As an air regulator and somebody who's dealt with Pacific Gas and Electric, they're a disgrace to the people they serve. So the sooner we get more people on solar, the sooner we have storage and get them affordability wise out into the grid. The one thing we have to work with the utilities on, or form a different governing source, is the infrastructure to get that energy, the solar farms, the wind farms, get that energy transmitted to the charging stations in the homes. And again, we have to be very aware of the fact that poorer people have less access to this. So it was a very calculated political move, in my view, where they took a real problem, which is access to renewables, solar in particular, for poor people who don't have the access, and the people who own their apartment dwellings, mostly in urban areas, don't invest in those kind of things. We need to deal with that, but we don't have to deal with it the cynical way that PG&E has asked the PUC to do. But we're going to have to stay on that. Because if they can do it here in California, they'll do it across the country.
I think there was a letter that was written by congressmen and you signed on. Could you tell us what that letter says? Because I think some of our members, I was trying to get my board members to sign a resolution in order to have PG&E not increase the fees on rooftop solar.
We'll get it to you. I believe that was led by Mike Thompson. I'm pretty sure, because Mike and I
Yes.
talked about it.
It was, and we just signed on to it about 2 weeks ago.
But we'll
And
get,
Edgar reached out, so yeah.
we'll get you the information. Who is that person? Sounds like that's the wizard behind the curtain.
I know.
Thank you,
I think
Chanel.
we have the letter, and I think Cecilia, if you can drop it in, it would be great. Yeah. And so we want to thank you, Mark, for signing that letter, because you were one of the signers. So thank you very much.
As I get older, I had lunch with my predecessor, George Miller, and he said, geez, I'm afraid, he was talking about himself, I'm starting to sound like those angry old guys on the park bench. And I said, I'm right behind you, George.
Well, does anyone else like to ask a question? You can go down to reactions and raise your hand through that mechanism. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, do we have, oh, here's a question from Karen Beck. Karen, go ahead.
Hi, Mark. I was gone for just a minute. Hello. I don't know if you said anything, or do you think the Build Back Better stuff is dead? Is it just, we're not going to get anything?
Or
Or
I hope
pieces
not.
of-
I'll be back there next week, and I'll get a better sense of talking to my colleagues. I hope not. I've already talked about the provision for universal free high quality childcare. We have to get that. Many of the investments in energy we have to get. A lot of, prescription drugs is big. That was another thing that I've been initiator because of the drug I take that keeps me alive that costs almost $500 a day, but in Australia it costs less than 50. So those issues in there, more support for senior care, because we know people, when you look at regionally, particularly the West Coast of the United States, good news for all of us. I look around, people over 65 are going to live longer, but we have to get support services, particularly for poorer people. So all of those things are in Build Back Better. I personally, I'm pretty frustrated with my colleagues in the other house.
Yeah.
But I think we'll get component parts of it. And I know for myself, I'm going to push very hard for the more investments than the infrastructure bill gives on climate change, help us in this county. On the childcare, hugely important for generational change in this country, and prescription drugs. We can't, the pharmaceutical companies in this country are just audaciously ripping us off. Years ago, I asked them, when I first went on my medication, I said, we had the chairman of Johnson & Johnson in, and he was in front of our committee, and in no small part because of yours truly. And, I asked some of them, not at that hearing, but before that, I said, well, why do you do this? It's not R&D, it's marketing, and you're making unbelievable profits. And most of, by the way, my drug, the taxpayers paid for most of the basic research at the American Cancer Institute in the NIH. And the answer was because you let us, because we can. The EU doesn't let them. Australia doesn't let them. The Japanese, the rest of the developed world. And so one of the most maddening things I bring up all the time, my Republican colleagues in public, is why are you making Americans subsidize the rest of the world so that they can get the medication they need to stay alive?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Oh, so Karen,
So,
you still have
we
your,
have to get those things. And by the way, they poll very well nationally with Republicans and Democrats.
Okay.
yes, yes. Sounds good. Karen, you still have your hand up. Is that okay? Sheila, do you have another question? You have to unmute yourself, Sheila. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes,
There we
I
go.
it's about Build Back Better. And I was listening to a podcast, and I always forget his name. He's got an X in his name. He's such a great talker and writer. Anyway, he was interviewing somebody about Build Back Better. And he said, this person said that when that came out, that people had kind of no emotional reaction to it. But when you break it down to its parts, then people say, yes, I'm in favor of that. Yes. And so they were talking about the marketing of Build Back Better being lousy. Oops.
Yeah, that's a constant conundrum. I went to one Democratic congressional, it was a DNC meeting, and I went back to my office and my chief of staff said, what's the matter? It was upsetting. I said, if I have to go to one more Democratic political meeting about messaging where I used more colorful language than I usually do, John Burton kind of language, somebody who's making millions of dollars telling politicians how to be authentic, I'm going to light my hair on fire and run around the US Capitol. So our messaging needs work. My friend David Cicilline has been our lead on this, the person I mentioned earlier. But on the other hand, it requires this kind of conversation. Communication is both by the person who's talking and the people who are listening. And it's a difficult period of time because of all this misinformation. So we put a lot of work into this, and that the power behind the Wizard of Oz who jumped in here, Chanel, we do a lot of work on our website and our social media to make sure everybody has the information. So the one thing I would say, we need to be better about marketing and being consistently on message. But these issues are complicated, and it requires people to be thoughtful about understanding them, especially in a world where the sophistication of misinformation is unlike anything humans have ever gone through before in our existence. So, the last thing I always say this when this comes up, people will say, you should be more like the Republicans. I said, I was a Republican. I don't want to be more like a Republican. They lie and they simplify. So somewhere in the middle, we need to do a better job. I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, Mark, we have enjoyed having you here. Thank you so much for your time. And you really are a favorite congressman. And I think you should welcome the San Ramon people because they are now in your district. So welcome.
One
San
of the reasons Chanel and I were over in Oakland at the Alameda Registrar's office is because we're going to represent San Ramon and Dublin, which I have represented in the past. I'm really looking forward to it. You've had a great, thoughtful, smart representative in Eric Swalwell, and
Yes.
we're gonna try to do as good a job as Eric, and with the qualities that we possess. So thank you so much. Thank
Yeah.
you for sending me back to Congress and to office all these years. I'm very grateful for
We were
you
gonna-
in the club and for people in the East Bay and Contra, Costa and Alameda.
We were going to try and bring Dinah Becton up and have her highlighted. You could maybe say a few words about Dinah Becton.
I'll be happy to. Dinah Becton is a friend. I've endorsed her. She's very hardworking. I'm so proud of this county because we elected an African-American woman to be countywide, a smart, long history of public service. I mean, Diana Becton is a friend, and she's been protecting people for a long time as a Superior Court judge. And she's been, I think, a really good, great district attorney. There's a lot of reaction to crime and Prop 47 and AB 493, or I can't remember the number that Lonnie Hancock did. So we've got to be thoughtful about our issues around crime and fear and be successful. We don't want to go back to what we did with 3 strikes that didn't work. Crime rates went up, and the US Supreme Court required us, the US Supreme Court, I mean, the conservative US Supreme Court, not as conservative as they are, demanded that California remove a quarter of the people who were in our state prison system, which at the time was the third largest prison system in the world per capita. The only 2 places that had a larger prison population per capita than China is the US. So Dinah Becton is the kind of district attorney I'm proud to say is a friend, and really hope that she overwhelmingly gets reelected.
No, thank you. Yes, and Dinah's coming up next, but Mark, thank you so much for your time. We
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thank you all. I love you.
Thank you.
You. And do we have Dinah here?
Sure, I'm
Oh,
here.
there you are. Yes. Good to see you, Diana. Let's see. Let me, so we don't really need an introduction to Dinah Becton. She just had her re-election campaign kickoff. It was 2 weeks ago on Saturday in Concord. There were more than 150 people there, and it was really exciting. And like tonight, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier was there to introduce her. I think our club remembers when she first ran for election. That was 4 years ago. We were so thrilled to have a candidate for district attorney who would actually do something worthwhile to fix our criminal justice system at the district attorney's office. I think we even donated $1,000 to her campaign, and we're supporting her again. And Diana, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Brody, and certainly good to be here with all of you, and thank you for hanging in there and taking time away from your schedules and your families to be in this meeting and give me a chance to share with you tonight. I probably couldn't ask for a better introduction than that Brody just gave me, and the congressman who's been a wonderful, wonderful supporter and friend from day one. And he has been an unwavering supporter. He certainly came tonight with great facts and evidence about why our campaign is so important. And I'm very appreciative of everything that he's doing for us in Washington. He represents the people of Contra Costa County and the greater Bay Area, and really California, if you will, in so many wonderful ways. So thank you for having me. Brody, I don't know if you want me to do a spiel or if you just want me to answer questions.
Well, tell us what you've done for the past 4 years. Tell us about your accomplishments.
Absolutely. And I'll be very brief because I know that there's some questions that people would like to ask about. But, and I think I know most everyone here, but for those that I don't know, please know that I've spent most of my career as a manager and a fighter for justice. And I've certainly been blessed to have an opportunity to serve this community for 22 years as a judge in Contra Costa County, where I was elected as presiding judge, which means I was over the entire court in a $54 million budget. And during that time, I handled complex criminal and civil matters, including not only criminal, but juvenile and environmental work as well. And all of those things are important in my role as district attorney. I supervise the the civil division, the felony criminal calendar, which is where all the plea bargains are made, and also served for a long stint in juvenile, where I actually asked to stay because the work was so near and dear to my heart. And then, of course, in my final 6 years, I served in a felony criminal calendar, trial calendar. I am past president of the National Association of Women Judges. I'm past chair of the State Bar Council on Access and Fairness, opening the doors for women and minorities to be a part of the legal profession. And currently, the governor has appointed me to two pivotal positions in the state. One, I serve as the public member of the Victims Compensation Board. And then two, I am on the governor's Judicial Selection Advisory Committee for Northern California, which gives me an opportunity to vet not only judges for Contra Costa County on behalf of the governor, but also for all of Northern California. So I'm grateful that 4 years ago, you elected me as your district attorney, and that was done with overwhelming support. And I'm proud to say that I have worked really hard in spite of the opposition that I have faced to deliver safety, justice, and progress for the people of Contra Costa County. And so I think the best thing for me to do tonight is to talk about promises made and promises kept. If you guys have heard this before. But these are challenging times. And I think, as the congressman was mentioning, we really have to be very careful about the approach that we take to the criminal justice system at this time. One of the things that someone said to me is people are all in their feelings these days about safety. And so we're at this really critical and pivotal point, and we want to make sure that all the progress that we've made in criminal justice reform in California through our legislative efforts and others, that we don't turn back the clock now, because cannot go back to the old failed policies of the past. But even in these challenging times, people want to feel safe in their homes and in their communities. And of course, everybody deserves to feel safe. And so I need you to know, one, everybody is always asking me about the smash and grabs, and I need you to know that that is a place where we are holding people accountable. Immediately after we had the big incident in Walnut Creek, where 90 people congregated at the Nordstroms at the same time and went into 3 separate entrances and stormed the store, taking merchandise and actually pushing staff around. The next day, 6 of us from Northern California district attorneys were on the phone. Why? Because we know that the person who is in Contra Costa today is in Santa Clara tomorrow. So we decided to pull our offices together to share resources and prosecution strategies so that we can make sure that those who are committing these crimes and creating that kind of fear in our communities are held accountable. I also work with law enforcement agencies, federal, state, and local, to make sure that we are sharing intelligence and we're able to bring to bear the best intelligence in solving these crimes. Every single person who's been apprehended in Contra Costa County has been charged with felony crimes. And so that's one way that we are keeping our community safe. Also, safety is always a #1 priority for me, just as it is for any district attorney. And supporting crime victims is also very important. So in addition to the retail theft, I want you to know that I'm Also using a smart approach to crime. I co-lead the Safe Streets Task Force, which combats violent crime throughout the county, coordinating again with several law enforcement agencies, federal, state, and local. And this task force concentrates on those few individuals in our community who are committing the most violent crimes. And this really gives us a chance to move our resources into those places where people are committing the most serious crimes in our county. I've also established in 2018, I think it was, the first human trafficking unit for Contra Costa County. We use not just prosecution, there's also a lot of education and prevention that goes on there. And we seek to deter those who want to victimize those in our county for labor or for sex. There's been a lot of changes with DNA, and we've been able to go back and solve old cases. So I also established a cold case unsolved homicide unit that works closely with law enforcement to resolve old cases when we can and bring justice to those victims and survivors. We have successfully prosecuted hate crimes in our community. I'm standing up against hate for any member of our community. I established a hate crimes committee so that we have a specialized unit of attorneys who evaluate those cases that come into our office and make sure that they are appropriately charged. We partnered with Code for America to dismiss thousands of old marijuana convictions because those convictions stay on a person's record and they keep them from getting jobs, housing, and opportunities in our community that we should all have. And so we were able, by partnering with Code for America, to dismiss over 3,400 felony and misdemeanor convictions affecting 2,400 individuals, primarily people of color in our community. I received a grant of $1 million. And this was a very important grant to me because, as I mentioned to you earlier, supporting our youth is very near and dear to my heart. And so that $1 million grant helped establish the first for Contra Costa County restorative youth justice diversion program. It is a pre-filing program for our kids. Yes, they are held accountable, and yes, victims' voices are heard. But most importantly for me, our kids get an opportunity for an assessment when there's been trauma in their life or whatever is causing them to be involved in criminal activity. They are able to get services. The whole goal is to reduce recidivism and reduce the huge racial and ethnic disparities that exist in our juvenile justice system. We want to give our kids a chance for a new start. And at the end of our program, they don't have criminal records. Their records are sealed. And we hope that we never see them because we know that the juvenile system is the gateway, it's the pipeline into the adult criminal system. I've also established the Reimagining Youth Justice Task Force, and there I'm working with members across our community. We want to think about how we're spending our money in Contra Costa County. Right now, we have a 220-bed facility for juvenile hall. There's only about 35 kids there, and therefore it's costing us about $550,000 a year per child to house them in that facility. Same thing for the boys' ranch. There's about 15 kids there now, could be less, and we're looking at alternatives to safely have those kids safely supervised in our community as opposed to in these restricted facilities. And figure out how we can decarcerate and use that funding to better serve community organizations so that our kids can be served in our communities. We're reviewing old cases. I'm grateful that I was able to secure on behalf of our county $1 million just recently out of the governor's budget. So we were able to do more work in our resentencing project. This gives us a chance to go back and look at old draconian sentences that we would never impose today. And many of the folks that we are looking at have served 25 and 30 years in prison. Yes, one gentleman that we welcomed home, I'll just tell you his story. His name was Christopher Hale. He committed a robbery, I think, He stole about $600. There was no one harmed. He'd been in prison for over 30 years, and we were able to recently welcome him home. So we're doing that kind of work, and we're grateful that the governor selected our county, one of 10 out of the 58 in Contra in California, to receive those funds so that we can continue to do that work. We are also making law enforcement and public officials to be held accountable for their abuses of power, as well as we've done the labor to improve our officer-involved shootings investigations. And I know that there's going to be some questions about that. And I want to, the first thing that happened in 2018, shortly after I took office, was to make sure that the first thing that we would do is to have accountability to our community when we're not filing charges. This hadn't happened before. So we release now public reports if we're not filing charges. They're very extensive reports that talk about the investigation as well as our legal conclusions. And they're now all posted on our website. So every case that we've decided since March of 2018, where we've not filed charges, you can be found on our website. In addition to that, we have done the work to completely retool our officer-involved shooting investigations. We now have the teams and the resources in place to be able to properly evaluate those cases. And I can only tell you, without getting into personnel issues, that when I announced that policy to issue public reports, it created a huge backlog because we only have really one person. There was a lawyer in our office who was responsible for responding to the scene, to really coordinating the investigation, and then also being the person who was also making the legal recommendations. And it just created a huge backlog of cases in our office. We were able to catch up all of those cases now through 2020, I think it's the right year. And so going forward, we hope that we will be able to give our decisions in an expeditious manner. And I'll explain a little bit more about that because I know there's a particular question. Let's see. I want to also be sure to mention that we have prioritized our charging decisions as I am trying to reduce our footprint on mass incarceration. As Congressman DeSaulnier mentioned, our prisons were overflowing for years based on the policies that we had in the past. And so we're always trying to figure out how do we create more diversion programs. I mentioned our youth diversion program, but we have adult diversion programs as well. We've prioritized our filing decisions away from low-level nonviolent offenses. We've made sure that people who have substance abuse problems are referred to treatment as opposed to being charged for crimes for low-level possession cases. And the same thing with mental health cases. We're trying to make sure that people get treatment as opposed to being criminalized. Our unhoused population, we also want to make sure that we're not criminalizing people because of their status. When I was sworn in, and there's so many more things, I guess I really do want to not forget to mention that our sexual assault test kits are up to date. And now we have in place as well, I've worked with our law enforcement agencies. They are paying a small fee per agency. By the way, I work with 25 law enforcement agencies in Contra, Costa County and 19 cities. So those agencies are contributing a small fee so that we've been able to establish an electronic tracking system in Contra Costa County so that those cases, those test kits don't get behind again. I also created the first standalone conviction integrity unit to investigate prior convictions and seek justice for those who may have been wrongly convicted, as well as to investigate claims of actual innocence and cases where there might be evidence involving significant integrity issues. When I was sworn in 4 years ago, I made a promise to do things differently. And together, I think we've built change that can last. There's been quite a bit of opposition to the work that we're doing. And I think we all know that, you know, when you're steering a ship and trying a big ship and you're trying to move it in another direction, the turning is slow. But I think we continue to do the work and we know that in the long haul, I feel very confident that we're moving in the right direction. And one thing for sure, we cannot go back to the failed policies of the past. And so I want to thank you all for the support that you have provided to me. And I hope I will have gained your trust and continue to have your support going forward. And I am here to answer any questions that you might have.
Wow, that is a lot. Thank you, Diana. That's amazing what you've been doing. I think we have some questions from Sylvia Benzler. Are you there? You had some questions?
Here, yes, hi.
Yeah, you had some good questions. I'm sure we're all interested.
So one question I have is, when can we expect to hear whether or not Officer Hall will be charged with a crime in the death of Tyrell Wilson?
Fair question. There's been a lot in the paper in San Francisco lately about the feud between who's going to conduct the investigations. And similarly in Contra Costa County, we have a protocol that all of the law enforcement agencies have signed on to. And that protocol is what establishes my office to be able to lead those investigations. When you read the protocol, you'll see that our investigation is not deemed complete. I would say in most instances, is not deemed complete until after the coroner's inquest. And that's actually been a significant part of the investigation, because if you've watched the inquest or been able to attend any in person, you know that generally speaking, the officers that are involved are going to be testifying at that time as well in public for the first time. And so as part of our investigation, that is a critical piece of evidence that we would want to have before we can make a final determination. Also, these cases, as painful as they are, they can be very nuanced, and especially with the changes in the law, this time will be the first time that we're evaluating cases under the new law that was passed with AB 392, changing the standard and also requiring other factors to be considered. So once that the sheriff conducts the coroner's inquest, we will also need to evaluate that case in light of the new law, and most likely we'll have to obtain expert testimony and expert evaluation of the use of force on that day as part of our investigation before we can reach our legal conclusions. So these cases are very nuanced, especially when a weapon is introduced. And so I hope I've answered your question. So first we have to wait on the coroner's inquest. And what we've established now that our cases are up to date is that we're generally trying to release our report within 90 days after the coroner's inquest.
Wow. That's amazing how much that has to be accomplished before you can do something. So Sylvia, does that answer your question? And did you have another question?
I had another question. So I'm just wondering, I've never asked a question like this before, but could you explain maybe the reason why Mary Knox, who works for you, is running against you? And is that unusual with an election for DA? And how do you see yourself as the better candidate of the two? I mean, everything you've said tonight tells me that you're the best candidate, but how, if you were in dialogue on a panel with her, what would you say your strengths would be?
Wow. Thank you for that question. I'm not trying to get in anybody's head, right, to explain, but is it usual, unusual? I think one of the things that I should say, and I don't know how many of you may have been able to tune in last night. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to serve on a panel last night that was talking about the selection that the president has promised to make to appoint a Black woman to the Supreme Court. But we had a chance to highlight how difficult it is for women of color to come into these positions. You all probably know that for the most part, nobody pays attention to prosecutor elections, right? This is something relatively new, and most prosecutors who have been male and white have been in those positions unchallenged for a really, really long time. But understand that When I became the district attorney of Contra Costa County, I was the first woman, the first person of color, the first Black woman to hold this position since 1850 when the office was established. Takes us all the way back to slavery, just for a perspective. And as a woman of color in this position, we have roughly 2,400 elected prosecutors in the country. Women of color are less than 1% in the entire country. And so walking into these positions, and the reason I mentioned the event last night is because we had a similar conversations about what happens, especially when Black women come into these positions that have primarily been occupied historically by men. And this is going to happen. And it's already happened with President Biden hasn't even nominated anyone yet, but before this person can even be nominated, people are already questioning her credentials. We're talking about women who are well educated, who have proven themselves over and over. But people start saying, oh, she's an affirmative action candidate, or she got the job because she's Black. And there's an immediate push to discredit her abilities. And so it's no different for me coming into what was predominantly a male space, coming into a space where I am pushing against policies that were always in place, I should say, for the last 30 or 40 years. Those are the policies where people valued convictions, where people valued long sentences, where people valued some different things that, one, led us to being the most over-incarcerated country in the world, but also resulted in very, very disproportionate rates as it relates to race in our jail system, in our prison system. That's what I'm fighting against. So if you want to distinguish me, I would distinguish myself this way. In addition to my accomplishments that I already shared with you, I don't think that there's anything that could prepare me greater to sit in this position than to have served as a judge for 22 years in this county, handling every kind of case that you can imagine. But in addition to that, I bring with me a perspective of a person who's not searching for the community. I am the community. I know what I'm talking about when I talk about the disparities that exist. I'm also the person who says, I am not going to go back to the old failed policies of the past. I am not going to criminalize those who have mental illness. I am not, as my opponent has promised to do, going to criminalize people and cite them for homelessness. I'm not going to do that. I am not going to criminalize people because they happen to be addicted to drugs. And I am going to fight for youth to have a second chance. I am going to fight to go back and look at old draconian sentences. And I'm going to fight like hell to reduce mass incarceration in this county. I'm going to fight and stand up for those who have been disenfranchised, who have been over incarcerated in this community. I am not here for myself. I stand up because I am passionate about the work that I'm doing. I am passionate that art is going to lean towards justice. And I just happen to be the person at this time who is called to sit in this seat to try to steer this ship in the direction of justice. Not a moment, this is a movement. It's very much like the civil rights movement. And this fight is going to live long after me. I've got to hold this space. I've got to hold this seat so that we can continue steering this ship. I was at an event this Saturday, an amazing event, and I saw Veronica's name in the chat. And I want to thank you for all the work that you're doing around social justice issues. I'm glad I had a chance to meet you in person. And I was explaining, I was talking to Tamisha and one other activist. And I said, somebody said this is like trying to steer a great big ship. It takes a long time to turn it. And they said to me, you know what, but we're tugboats and we're helping you to push that boat and to turn it around. But if I haven't made a passionate plea to tell you the differences, it's the difference between the old failed policies of the past that did not keep our communities any safer and moving towards a new vision of what safety really looks like. And that's safety for everyone, not just for some. Thank you for the.
That's amazing. I am so glad to hear that you're not going to criminalize homelessness. You're not going to criminalize mental illness. Oh my goodness. So thank you, Diana. Did she answer your question? Sylvia? Okay, I think we have some more. Karen Beck, do you have a question?
Hi, I'm such an admirer of yours. Your humility and grace is really amazing. So thank you. You know, Danville City Council is really, I think, putting out a lot of real negative things about you. I keep talking to different people who say things, and I wanted to just sort of, ask you this. One person recently said to me that their problem was that they think you don't get along with women because of the things that are going on in your office, where these women are, have sued you. How should we respond to that when people say such a thing?
Thank you for bringing that up. And, we also have to remember that my opponent is the primary leader in the federal lawsuit against me. Everybody knows that when a new administration comes in, the president, the governor, district attorneys, you get to choose who sits at your management table, right? Everybody knows that the captain gets to pick her team. And one of the things that we want to think about when you're choosing a team is that people are going to be on your team who are not only going to have the experience and the knowledge and all of that, but who are also going to be willing to carry out the vision and the policies that you're set for the office.
Right.
And so you have to understand that I'm being sued because
you made your own.
Some people didn't get to make the team, right?
Yeah.
And so I first got sued for political retaliation, found unfounded, and now I'm being sued for gender and age. Let's look at the facts. When I came into this office was, there were 43% of the office were women and very, very few people of color. The office is now 55% women.
Oh.
I am making strides as I seek to diversify this office and seek to diversify who sits in the seats of power. By the way, I appointed the very first in this county's history female chief of staff. I appointed the very first female woman of color to sit as my chief of staff. My management team has more women than it does men. It's just a matter that you didn't get to sit at the table that I am being criticized. So let's be clear, I'm not against women. I have spent my entire life, my entire career. When I tell you was president of the National Association of Women Judges, that is an organization that fights for women to have a seat at the table. That's where I've committed my work, for women and people of color to have a seat at the table. And if you don't have a seat, I will help you to get a chair and bring it to the table. That's what I'm about. And so when people are criticizing me and saying I don't like women, look at the facts, look at the statistics, and then look at the policies that the people who want to sit at this table are promoting. They're promoting the old failed policies of the past. They will not follow the vision that I'm setting for the office and the direction that I'm setting for the office. That's why they don't have a seat at the table.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, yes. Veronica, do you have a question?
Yes. If you allow me maybe two questions very quickly. First, thank you so much for coming on Saturday. It really was our honor to have you at Danville's first social justice fair. It's been very impressive to hear tonight to really get an overview of all that you've done since coming to the office of district attorney. I was a bit curious about, obviously I want to ask on behalf of the family of Tyrell Wilson, just what sort of victim liaison do you have at your office to kind of reach out to families, especially families impacted by police violence? I'm not sure if you have staff or if you have people who are specifically assigned to those sorts of tasks.
Yes, we have a 17-person victim assistance unit. And if no one has reached out to the family, please make me aware of that. And I will make sure that happens.
No, thank you. And then my second question, I know this is going to be incredibly hard to do, but I just wanted to know, make sure it's not off the table, but would you consider charging Andrew Hall with a hate crime given his pattern of behavior?
That case is still ongoing, so it'd
Ongoing,
be
so
very
can't.
inappropriate for me to answer that question.
All right, trying to make it hypothetical. And final, you talked, sorry, third one. Earlier you mentioned the Boys Ranch and Juvenile Hall. Could you give maybe a more concrete timeline of when those might be closing down? This is a 1 year, 2 year, 3 years out?
I don't think that there's any plan to close. And if you're watching closely, the work in San Francisco and the work in Los Angeles, where those are the first two counties to lead out. San Francisco was supposed to close Juvenile Hall 2 years ago, and now they're finding it's not really a conversation of closing every facility. It's really because unfortunately, there are some youth who are not at this moment in time able to safely be housed in our communities. And so there has to be some facility. The question really becomes, how do you spend your resources? Does it need to be a 220 bed facility to house 35 kids? Does it need to be, and if you've ever had a chance to visit Juvenile Hall, you know it's very much like an institution. It's very much almost like a prison, right? If you've visited. And so there's a new idea now about how our kids should be treated, even those who are not able to be in our communities at that moment. And so we need to reimagine what those places look like, what kind of services should be there, what kind of place it should be. It should be healing. It should be rehabilitative. It should be all of those things, and not having our kids in places that feel like prisons.
So does that suggest building a new facility or using a different space, or just using existing space differently?
I would think it could be any combination of those things.
Okay.
But I don't think it's keeping the same things that we have right now.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, we have another question. Thank you. Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm just unmuting myself. Good evening. Thank you, DA Becton, for being here. I appreciate all that you've done in the 4 years that you've been here. It's very impressive, and I do feel you're making our county a better place. So thank you for your service. I'm asking about the coroner's report on Tyrell Wilson and the fact that it's been almost a year. It'll be a year, March 11th, I believe, that he was killed by Officer Hall, and the report is still not released. And you know, that just seems shocking to me as a resident. And I'm just wondering, first of all, can this just go on indefinitely? Second of all, I believe that there's an assembly bill out, either 1690 or 169, I'm not sure. And if something like that were to be passed, where the duties of the sheriff and coroner could now be separated, would that expedite releasing a report like this? Because it seems like this whole investigation into Tyrell's killing it's halted because it almost seems like it's a stall tactic by the sheriff to not release the report.
Yeah, I mean, there is legislation pending that would separate the responsibilities and the oversight of the coroner's office and the sheriff's department, and that has happened in many counties. Whether or not that's going to expedite the coroner's report, I don't know. We don't know that yet. What we do know is that when the sheriff does hold the inquest, that at that inquest, the coroner will generally give his report or her report. And so you should be able to hear at that time what findings they've made, and the report should be made available at that time.
Does it seem like it's been an unusually long amount of time?
I haven't, just to be honest with you, the reason I can't answer that question is I've not actually compared the time to any other cases to figure out how long it has taken. So it would be misplaced for me to try to answer that question without going back and doing some comparisons.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Yes, Tina.
Ms. Beckman, I thought that there was a human trafficking grant that was given to you in 2018 is a 3-year grant? And you
Correct.
applied for a grant in this past year and you didn't get it?
Correct.
Why?
Well, there are a number of reasons why we did not receive the grant. I've just gotten the information from the evaluator. The first thing that the evaluator shared with me is that, we have to go through the county to be able to do our hiring. And so it took us almost 2 years to be able to hire our coordinator and also to hire our investigative staff. So that was a huge setback for us. The other problems that I think were identified by that grant, and by the way, let me make sure that I say this to you because I have the commitment from the county. Nothing is going to change whether we have the grant or not have the grant. We are still continuing the work, and the county has assured me that in our next budget cycle, we will have the funding that we need in order to continue to do this important work on behalf of the county. So we have lots of grants that don't always get renewed. But thank you for highlighting this particular one. There's probably a few things that have been found in addition to the delay in getting our staffing on board. There has to be a greater, I would say, a definition. We have co-coordinators between our office and our victim service providers. There needs to be a greater emphasis placed on the roles that each of them will play. And we also, the federal government is very, very interested in making sure that labor trafficking, which is a much harder kind of case to either uncover and also to investigate and prosecute, that we place a greater emphasis on those cases. And that's really around the country. And so we've had a very robust prosecution of cases related to sex. We've not had as robust prosecution of cases related to labor, but we are working with our labor partners. And just so you know, I have done a complete 360 listening session with all of our justice partners. We are doing a reset in our human trafficking unit. And I have no doubt that we will go forward. We will continue to be successful in this work, and we will continue to have the funding that we need to do the work, irrespective of the grant.
It seems that 2 years to hire somebody would be an exceptionally long period of time when you had the money for 2 years.
Yeah, but you don't understand apparently the workings that we have to go through with the county. We don't have an HR department. Most departments in Contra Costa do not have their own HR. We have to work through the county. Also, these are temporary positions. So sometimes when we create something new, sometimes the county has to decide, well, what is this thing? The same thing happened with my neighborhood courts. I got the funding to do neighborhood courts in 2018. I was just able to hire in the last few months, because at first we were not able to determine what is the classification for this thing, what kind of person is needed. And we have to wait for our HR department to go through its wheels. We can hire without them. I can't go out on my own and do anything. They have to create the classifications, they have to do the job postings, and they have to do all of that initial work. And so it might sound, 2 years is a long time to me too, but I don't control that part of things.
And there's nobody on your staff that could have done that before? They could not have?
We don't, the county structure does not allow us to do the work. The county structure requires that the district attorney's office use the county's HR department. So I don't run that department.
Right.
We are dependent on them for our services and for our hiring and for our recruitment. So that is sometimes moves a little bit slow. So I don't control that though.
One last question. How many of the 90 people that were doing the slash and take have been prosecuted? You said that you charged. How many?
There were 90 people who went into the Nordstroms all at once. There were 4 that were apprehended by law enforcement. What's important to know, the district attorney's office is not on the streets arresting, right? We have to wait until an arrest is made by law enforcement, until those cases are investigated. And when law enforcement feels that there's sufficient evidence to prosecute a case, they bring the case to us. 4 people were apprehended out of the Walnut Creek cases. Every single one of those cases has been charged by my office. The cases that originated in San Ramon and Danville, every single person that was brought into my office has been charged and prosecuted.
So far, the 90 have been charged.
That's what was apprehended, ma'am. You can only imagine that if 90 people congregated on a store at once, law enforcement, and then they all ran out at once, most likely the police who were on duty that day could not capture all of those people. And so 4 people were arrested by the Walnut Creek Police Department. 4 people were brought into my office for prosecution. 4 people have been prosecuted with felony crimes.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Wow. Cheryl, you have a question?
A few less costly questions.
That wasn't me.
Um,
That wasn't my voice anyway.
Okay.
Thank you, Brody. Thank you, DA Becton. I wanted to say a couple of things. Thank you for clearing up the backlog of the untested sexual assaults, because that's very important. And I know me personally, I take that one very seriously. As well, for those of you who don't know, I know Miss Veronica knows, because she participates in this with me, for giving us this kind of unfettered access on our DA accountability table that we meet about monthly, every 6 weeks or so. We did not have that previously. For those of you, we have a meeting with the DA, and we go over some of these issues that some of you are bringing up tonight, and we call it an accountability roundtable. And we discuss some of the same things you're asking about. And the madam who asked earlier about support of women, I personally just wanted to say that it's more than just women in office. I mean, some of us don't support each other in the streets. So there's that question. But I will say that as somebody who is elected into office, I appreciate the support that I've received from then Judge Becton and now DA Becton. I did want to ask you if you could speak to about the environmental. I remember when we spoke when you first came into office, I spoke about how the Alameda County DA had a specific number of individuals who were assigned to deal with environmental cases in Alameda County. And I remember you were putting together a very similar group for Contra Costa County. And I know that they were working on some things. So I just wanted to hear you talk about that for a few minutes, please.
Well, I maintain an environmental unit in the district attorney's office. That is the unit that does a lot of work around issues, particularly those corporations and companies that are committing hazardous waste in our communities. And we have prosecuted a number of cases. We just most recently had a settlement against a big steel company who was allowing hazardous waste into our communities out in East County. There are so many cases that we have been able to successfully prosecute. You can find all of those press releases on our website, and you can see the variety and the number of the kinds of cases. We are a very collaborative unit. We've worked very closely with state and federal entities as well. And so even though we don't have a large department, I have a very, very experienced prosecutor there who has dedicated most of his career to environmental work. And we have been able to successfully prosecute many cases. And please look on our website for those press releases, and you can see the work that we've done there.
Thank you.
Well, that's good to know. That's something I didn't know. So thank you, Cheryl, for asking that. Dinah, we have enjoyed so much having you here. Thank you for answering our questions and telling us about all your accomplishments. We're just so happy to support you in your reelection. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your continued support. I never shy away from the tough questions, and so if you didn't get your questions answered here today, you can always contact me at my office, and I'm happy to engage. And thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Champagne. They've put some of my links in the chat, and I appreciate all the support from you all. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay.
And thank you for all that you do as well.
Yeah, thank you for answering our questions. They were hard, so thank you. You did an amazing job.
Thank you.
Okay, I think it's just us now. Does anyone have any comments or we have Igor here. Igor, I don't know, do you have time to tell us about rooftop solar?
Yeah, I think I can do it quickly and then,
Okay.
yeah. Well,
Well, let me introduce you because you're with the Sierra Club, is that correct?
I'm not here today in that capacity, but yes, I am involved with the Sierra Club locally and statewide.
How about the Environmental Caucus of CDP?
Yes,
Yes,
I am
there we
chair
go.
of the Environmental Caucus.
Of the California Democratic Party. So thank you, Igor, for being here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I know I am, wow, that this was, I've been to so many meetings, and I think the caliber of questions, like just the level of insight asked here is second to none. So it's truly an honor, and I'm very humbled to be here. And I will do my best to answer any questions should there be any. I'm here to talk about, as someone who was born in Ukraine, I should stop saying existential crisis because everything is starting to feel like existential and a crisis. But I think we would all agree that one existential crisis we all care about is how to quickly combat climate change to ensure that this is a place that our kids and grandkids can find to be a better place, or at least a not worse place than how we found it. And in order to leave a better world for future generations, rooftop solar is one of the solutions. It's one of California's fastest growing solutions. Other states have used the model of California to also do their part to combat climate change. The Biden administration is looking to California and has made a bold pronouncement that we need to double the amount of solar, including rooftop solar, by 2025, and then double it again by 2030. Against that backdrop, PG&E and the two other investor-owned utilities submitted a proposal last year to the California Public Utilities Commission that would do just the opposite. It would slam the brakes on solar adoption. Their proposal, which the California Public Utilities Commission pretty much adopted a proposal that's a carbon copy of, has been found by analysts, like if it goes through in its current form, to slash the amount of rooftop solar by 50%. And this will cause a real impact as well on up to 65,000 well-paying jobs in the rooftop solar sector. And by the way, let me tell you that these are jobs with career prospects, and a lot of folks in those spaces, they have family members that depend on those jobs as well. And it's also one of the very few jobs that is well-paying that does not require a college degree. So all of that would be in jeopardy if PG&E and the other utilities have their way. Here are our three asks. And I will go through the proposal briefly because it will inform why we're asking for these things. So the number one ask is no solar tax. The California Public Utilities, or CPUC proposal, which is the same as the PG&E one, would provide us a solar tax of $57 a month, regardless of income level, unless you make a household income of basically $35,000 or less. So we're saying no solar tax. We should not be penalizing folks that are putting their hard-earned savings into solar, trying to do the right thing for the planet and the people and the animals and wildlife that call it home. Number two, the folks that did get solar under previous or now, well, current rules until there's this change, were promised that they would be under those rules for 20 years. This upends it by saying you have 5 fewer years to get your solar panel to pay for itself. And the combination of the solar tax and an 80% slashing in the net export credit. And that is the credit that you get, because you should be rewarded for producing more energy than you consume. That's a good thing. It helps with reliability of the grid. You can give it to your neighbor. But this would slash the amount you get compensated if you sell your solar back to the grid by 80%. And the combinations of those two things would take solar from a payback period of 5 to 7 years on average to one of 20 years. So Elon Musk, if he ever moves back to California, will still be able to afford solar. That's not who this is going after. This is going after you, me, the 99%, the middle class and working class folks. So the final ask of the CPUC, should you adopt a resolution that I think I sent over, was basically the 3 principles. And should you vote to join the Solar Rights Alliance, which is a broad coalition of over 700 organizations and elected officials that are united behind these 3 asks. The third and final ask, and this one is near and dear to my heart, is make or continue to make solar more affordable and accessible to all, particularly working class and middle class families, not less. A 2019 LBNL study, which is the last full year for which we have data, shows that 2/3 of rooftop solar adopters that year had a household income of $150,000 or less. So firmly middle class and working class. Over 40% of those same households, or of all households, had household incomes of 100,000 or less. And my favorite statistic is the one that says that year, there were more solar adopters making a household income of under $50,000 than there were adopters of over $250,000. So for those reasons, and I will be putting links in the chat shortly, to, Igor didn't make this up. This is all has been analyzed, and there are citations to every single thing I said. I look forward to your questions, and I urge you to adopt the same support resolution that the California Democratic Party has, that at this point, dozens upon dozens of Democratic clubs have, that the affordable housing community has. And like I said, over 700 organizations, elected officials, including 26 members of Congress, one of whom joined you earlier this evening. Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Yes, thank you. That's very impressive with all those congressmen. Do we have any questions for Igor? Okay, we have one from Ellis.
Of course.
Of course. On Monday, the Tri-Valley Dems adopted the resolution that my friend Igor talks of. And it should also be mentioned that Igor is the vice chair of the Alameda County Central Committee. I move that the San Ramon Democratic Club adopt that resolution.
I'll second it.
That would be very good, but I haven't circulated the resolution.
Oh, okay.
People, oh, Igor just put it in. If people would like to read it now, really quick, it's not that long. That would be really, really great. Yeah, there it is. Yes.
Right, Bonanno's
So
probably.
I ask you, everybody, to click your link in chat and read the resolution. That's the one that says Google Doc, correct? Not the coalition. Yes. And so if everybody, if you could please read that, and when you're done reading it, if you could just use the reaction and raise your hand with the reaction. But do we have any other questions while we are reading it? Do we have any other questions for Igor here? Igor, maybe you could just touch upon one of the reasons why people were reluctant to agree with this resolution was that there were conflicting reports. There were reports that, and I don't really understand it. That's why I'm glad you're here. The really poor people are going to, because of the solar, rooftop solar, the poor people of lower income are going to have greater and higher PG&E bills. Can you explain that and help us understand that?
I would be happy to. And by the way, not a single environmental justice organization that I'm aware of has said, let's side with PG&E. However, PG&E and the other utilities have, there is a list of, it's this AstroTurf coalition called Affordable Clean Energy for All. Might as well just add cute puppies along with it. And Sammy Roth of the LA Times went through the data and found that 2/3 of the folks in that coalition take money from utilities. But to the actual question, there is a cost shift fallacy. I just put this information in the chat. The utilities are claiming that there's this fictional cost shift, when the reality is that a study has shown, and I will find that link and put it in the chat, just keeping rooftop solar growing, keeping net energy metering growing, actually does the opposite. Over 30 years, it saves all ratepayers, whether they own solar or not, or are renters and have rooftop solar that supplies energy to their units. Everyone saves $120 billion over 30 years. Now, utilities are doing this. They're attacking solar because they want to continue to raise your rates. And they're not going to stop, whether or not we are going to have more solar, less solar, because they have a guaranteed rate of profit of 8 to 10% on transmission lines. So the way they calculate this cost shift is by using fuzzy math that takes into account all the benefits of central solar and transmission lines, but none of the costs. And the societal costs are many. And I'm not even going to mention the fires here that have been caused by many of these transmission lines sparking. By the way, we as ratepayers last year alone had to foot the bill to the tune of $9 billion to PG&E, half of it to clean up messes of their own making. So fire mitigation fund, all of that was footed by us. The reality is we do need all forms of solar. We will still need more central solar, a little more. We will need a lot more rooftop solar in order to meet our climate energy goals and needs. It's just that the utilities that have a guaranteed amount of profit, because they operate on a shareholder model, they want even more profit. And that's why they're going after distributed energy, because it will be a sliver less profit for them.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've had time to read the resolution. We have a motion on the board, on the floor to approve the resolution. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a second.
I thought I
Okay,
seconded you.
okay. And if I could have everybody, we'll take a vote by going down and looking at your reactions, and everyone who wants to vote yes, please hit your reactions on the bottom of your screen, and it says raise hand, so raise your hand. Thank you. And Rick, you're gonna have to help me. We're gonna try and count these votes.
And
Well, this, let me do it by the gallery view. Okay.
So far, I see 12. Igor, are you not going to vote for it?
Oh,
I don't think I'm a member. I'd love to become one.
We get 2 votes.
yes, you get 2 votes.
Oh, okay.
That's
All right.
13.
And okay, all right.
Are there any other 2 votes?
Steve Beck and Karen Beck.
Okay, I have 14.
Stephanie and Chris Taddeo.
I've got you. Yes.
Okay.
You got 2 of them, so that's more than that's
Oh,
that's 14. And so out of the people that are members here, I think, is
I have
there,
15.
okay, let's take them down and now, okay, 15. Okay, let's see, everybody lower their hand. Okay, are we going to, we're gonna ask for those that want to, oh wait, are they still,
Hold on, we're blowing hands.
yeah, we're lowering hands. Okay, now we're going to, all those that want to vote no, please raise your hand.
Okay,
I see 1.
we have 1.
Any more? Okay, then I think that
So
then.
did you just raise your hand too, Brody?
Yeah, I was just, no.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So, okay, it passes. So thank you so much. We'll post this on our website that we've approved this resolution. Thank you. It's passed 15-1.
yay.
So thank
Thanks,
you,
Igor.
everyone. Do we have any, is Veronica still here? No? Okay, I was just
No.
wondering if anybody had any more announcements tonight. It's sort of a long night.
Brody?
Oh, wait, we have a really big announcement. This Saturday, right, Rick?
Yep.
Yeah, this Saturday at 3 o'clock at Rick's house. He's in San Ramon, 16 Chaparral Court.
18.
Yeah, oh, okay, excuse me, 18. And he'll
Don't
have
go
a
to my
little-
neighbors.
Yeah. And we get to, you get to talk informally to Dinah Becton. I mean, it was really nice here. We felt as though we were talking, I mean, we could talk to her and we felt like she was talking to us. So that was really good. But, you know, if you really want to get to know her, please come invite. Also, what's real important is invite your friends and your neighbors. Maybe they haven't met Dinah before, been to a meeting with her. So invite them to come to Rick's tomorrow at 3 o'clock.
Saturday.
Saturday.
Don't come tomorrow.
I'm sorry, that's, yeah, tomorrow. I'm sorry. That's
I
right.
just
Saturday.
put the link in the chat again, so
Oh,
you can
good.
sign up
Oh,
there.
yeah, to sign up. Yes, we're signing
you.
up through Dinah Becton's campaign. So yes, please sign up. Yes. Okay, that's wonderful. I hope everybody comes and brings their neighbors.
Brody, you said earlier that the club donated $1,000 to Dinah's initial campaign.
Yes.
Is it possible to make a motion to donate a similar amount
We already
to
have.
this campaign?
I think we already have. I have to talk to our treasurer, but I know we've donated 500 already last year, and I think we've donated, we wanted to split it up between the years, but Brian, do you know if we've donated? I think we approved 500, additional 500 for her. Is he here? Oh, he's not here. Okay, I'm pretty sure, but Ellis, I think we have already, and we can do
Okay.
it at the board level.
It's done,
Yes.
never mind.
Yes. Of course, that's what we use. Our dues are very low. They're only $25 per person, but we keep them and we use them to elect Democrats, our local Democrats. So yes. Yes. So thank you all for being here tonight. Are there any other questions or comments or announcements? Thank you. Oh, Chuck's got his Becton t-shirt on. Thank you for being here, Chuck, from the Democratic Party of Contra Costa County. Yeah. Okay, well, those that want to stay by and chat, feel free. Thank you, Igor. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Igor.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
me.
for coming. That was really great. I appreciate your time. Yes, it was great. Thank you, Igor.
Tough act to follow the other two speakers.
Oh, wait a minute. I do have one more question real quick of Igor. Part of that proposal was the people that already have solar, we're going to have a 20-year window. I mean, originally we were promised that, but then they were going to go to a 15-year. And I know that wasn't part of the resolution, but is that, are they still trying to fight that?
Yes, we're trying to fight everything. And you know what? I got so worked up about this and Ukraine and everything. I didn't even mention the what the game plan is. So right now, actually, we need to just call the governor, and I put I'll put it in the chat again, and demand not only that the proposed decision be shelved, because right now it does include retroactive charges on solar users as well, but also just to actually demand transparency, because everyone is in the dark right now about when they're going to issue a new proposal. So they need to provide a timeline, because this has been hanging like a dark cloud over communities all over our state for many months. And I think we deserve to know what's happening.
Yes, did you put the action items in chat?
Yeah, let me, okay, so I'm gonna actually put the script and you can call the governor and say this. But also say like, we need to hear from your CPUC appointees about a clear timeline. We're in the dark. This is a black box and we deserve answers.
Igor, if I want to put this in one of our emails that goes out, how late can we be doing this? When's the deadline?
You know, we are now hearing that this might not come up. Well, let me put it this way. The earliest it will come up now is March 17th. We have heard rumors and innuendo that it may be months before it actually comes up, but everyone is in the dark. So we need to be vigilant, and let's just assume the worst and say March 17th.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I can put it in my emails and we'll have more people see it. Because our email goes to 600 people. So that's great. Yeah.
They're pushing it back. They're pushing it back.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing.
When are we going to get public utilities? Publicly owned utilities. Will that ever come about?
It's a great question. We have, there's some public, actually there was a bill we were looking at that sort of is the conceptual thing of maybe making some of the investor-owned utilities actually having a portion of them be public, which is super interesting. So folks are getting sick and tired of PG&E.
They're fighting in San Francisco for it.
What?
They were fighting in San Francisco for publicly owned.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, San Francisco has its own municipal utility. There's some others. Some of them are better than others. The Sacramento Municipal Utility District, or SMUD, they talk a good game. They did the same thing that this net energy metering 3.0 proposal is going to do. And that's an elected board. So that's what the Sacramento community has to deal with now.
Okay. What do you think the governor is going to do? I mean, is he sympathetic to our resolution, or is he adamant not to approve it? What do you think he can be swayed?
The only way to sway him is to continue reminding him, like to keep passing resolutions, keep calling him, keep doing letters to the editor, keep calling into CPUC meetings. And there are 2 polls out. And one of them, notably, it's an independently commissioned poll. It was not commissioned by the industry or anyone on the utility side. And it shows that 2/3 of Californians support keeping net energy metering intact or strengthening it. So again, that's actually a greater margin than the number of folks that voted no in the recall. So the governor has to pay attention to that. And we're hoping that some of his political advisors are realizing this is not an industry thing. Like, actually, this has really mobilized an entire community. It's like this. There are very few issues that unify tenants, landlords, YIMBYs, NIMBYs, Democrats, Republicans. All of them are saying we need to strengthen this. We need to keep moving forward, not backward.
Oh, good. Oh, good. That's good to hear. Thank you. That's some good news. Okay. Anything else that we should be discussing? We've got Karen Beck going to Farmers Market on Saturday, and we're all going to go in the afternoon. We're going to go to the house party at Rick's house. Cool. Okay, well, that sounds great. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate you coming. Look at for our next meeting. I think hopefully we're going to be interviewing the candidates for county clerk of Contra Costa County. And, that's something we all should get involved with and find out who these people are. And by that time in March, we also may have a few candidates for, I think it's either the assessor or the auditor. I've had some cryptic emails saying there might be somebody running them. So that should be interesting if we can have more candidates for the other assessor or auditor too. So thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate Is everybody here on the, yeah, I think they are, under the CBCDC emails? I think so, yes, okay. All right, thank you so much. We're going to join and I'm gonna have some of the rest of my dinner now. Okay, thank you so much.